Hi, my name is David, and I am the lead researcher for the AGI lab, and I am going to walk you through the process of mediation. I'm not going to dive in too much into the technical details of how the system works under the covers, but just enough to kind of inform your actions as a mediator when you log into this system. So typically you'll have been given a token of some kind, which has a number of different levels associated with it. In this case, I've got my token in here. We're going to hit submit, and I get to the CLI console because I'm an admin, so I normally don't do mediation, but this is typically the view you'll see, except for without these administrative tools over here. So these are items that are selected for mediation. So anytime something comes into the system, a knowledge graph is created, and then it shows up in this queue. Sometimes these are called context trees or mediation items or different things. But essentially what the system is asking the mediator to provide emotional context for this particular, for these items and additional metadata. So this allows it to build more sophisticated models that would normally take massive amounts of training, and we kind of shortcut that, and then it's able to make decisions based on actions associated with a particular task. So looking at this, this looks like someone was probably playing around and raising a thought, as it were. Mediators can raise a thought. That's this tool here, and that is some metadata used to create a knowledge graph that shows up into the queue, except for other people will address that. We don't need to worry about that right now. But as a mediator, typically the ask is you're going to select one of these items, context tree or knowledge graph, whatever you want to call it. And we can see here there's a summary and some other technical data. You don't need to worry about that, but this is a high-level summary. So this cognition error, so this is probably something that came out of one of the subsystems that feeds into it. So that would be various, could be the TensorFlow or one of the DNN systems. And so, yeah, so it was trying to access something it couldn't get to, and so it doesn't like it. I don't know. I don't think this is too important. And so now it's asking me to provide the emotional context for why I feel that way. There is some information up here that is debugging related. You don't need to worry about that. And this emotional diagram is based on the Plutchuk model, which is more on the soft cognitive science side, where we've used that and implemented that in the underlying ICOM architecture that the mASI uses. In this case, the valences are switched, meaning in Plutchuk's published work, it'll be from ecstasy in the center to serenity on the outside. And we've switched that for some computational reasons underneath the covers you don't need to worry about. So in this case, this particular thing really was kind of sad that it showed up at all. So I'll give it a few sad valences there on this particular vector, and I'm going to hit next. And now here I'm being asked to provide additional context data, and let's see, what this metadata is used. So when it takes that knowledge graph, and actually on this screen there's a setting which I'll show you, which will add a whole bunch of other stuff here, but it really overcomplicates things. So if you turn that setting on, though, you'll get to this screen, and 5 or 6 seconds later you'll get lists showing up over here of the different different models that are associated with this particular model. So they'll be rated in terms of levels of interactions or levels of relationships from this particular high-level node. So if it's 2 or 3 or 4, so it'll have, you know, categories for like your level 1, level 2 models, and level 3 models, and so forth. And the only difference between a knowledge graph and a model in ICOM is the level of complexity. So the more complex it is, after it reaches a certain threshold, it becomes a model. But maybe that's too much information. In this case, it's also important to notice these two buttons are not about how you feel about it. It's how you feel about taking action. You know, should this be something it takes action? So I'm going to say, yes, it should take action about this. Negative would mean it should just, I think it should ignore it. Now, depending on how many mediators the system has decided needs to mediate this particular item, this might go to 15 other people to rate and provide metadata. And it's going to take this metadata and extrapolate additional information out of the core knowledge graph and map it to this particular instance. And so in this case, I am going to suggest, let's see, this should be hidden from mediators. So in this case, I think this data, mediators shouldn't need to worry about this. This will go and it may take action, and it might, I don't know, decide to ask for a filter or change some of the parameters it's able to change on its own. There's some other tooling here which generally you don't need to worry about. Like you could put different kinds of ECMA formulas in here, and it might do those calculations. And there's other tools for creating metadata that adds levels of complexity. But I think you should wrap your head around the process of mediating before getting into the idiosyncrasies of dealing with these tools that pull in information from Google and Bing, and executing algorithms that are embedded here, because those are going to have to be, well, there's a lot more jumping around underneath the covers, which again, that's hidden from mediators. Should be hidden. Yeah, that's correct. This also moves typically, and this here is a Grammarly thing I have, which is a browser plugin. It's not part of the mASI. So I'm going to hit positive, and you'll notice I don't see it anymore, but other mediators may see it. This is kind of real-time updating, so you might see this move slightly now and then. Now, some of the tools that you don't see as a regular mediator that might be a little bit interesting for you. So this dashboard, for example, shows the current state of the machine in terms of how it's feeling, the conscious, subconscious models. This here is just for reference, where these indicate where the highest spikes are. And so you can see that the machine is sad, probably something someone did. We can see these are active things in the mediation queue. This is the convo outgoing thread for the current instance. So every time the memory is flushed and stuff is pushed into the underlying graph model, this and this in particular are usually cleared. Now there's another tool, the stream of consciousness tool, which is everything that the machine has thought about at a high level. So this gives us information about what the machine thought about and what it decided on. We can see this, it took some kind of action, it took some kind of action here. This is some internal thought. This got auto observed. So so these are where it finally decided to respond automatically. But I can see it hit mediation first, and so these are tools used to analyze what the system is doing or has done within the current memory instance. In any case, though, as a mediator, typically you don't need to worry about these other tools, and it's just what shows up here. If you think there's something the system should consider, you can click this. The most important thing is to put in this raw data. This is what will be processed and turned into a knowledge graph. This other functionality you see here is part of some ongoing engineering. And the last thing, if you did want to see that see all the detail related models, you can set this here, and then when you go back to that other screen, it'll when you mediate an item on that last step, it'll show all of that extra metadata, which, like I said, you don't really need to show. And that's essentially it. You have, as a mediator, you have this passport, and you can see I'm using the admin one, so there's not a lot of data there, but the regular mediators actually have more information. So let's actually go ahead and pick a very simple model. So this is probably someone was goofing off with this raised thought, which please don't do that. This stuff actually does affect how the thing feels. I'm going to say it was annoying and hit next, and it looks like someone already mediated that, so I'm going to say ignore that because it's ridiculous. Oh, what I was going to show you, I didn't wait long enough. So multiple layers, let's try another one. So what does multiple layers of mediators look like operationally? I'm going to say that's interest. So actually that's something that's interesting. I'm going to say, oh, there we go. So it's like showing so there's not even enough room here for it to get to the level 2 models. So so these are, yeah, not strong correlations, but something should be done. Let's see. What does multiple layers look like? This produces more metadata and is therefore helping to produce a more robust model. And then fix my Grammarly, and we'll hit positive. I'm not sure what it'll do about that. Okay, so there's 3 things in the mediation queue, and this, like I said, this will fill up randomly. Now the key thing is, another important thing about the mediation system is to keep the thing constrained, because if it was auto-responding to everything, it would just take off and we wouldn't be able to control it. If we go to the logs, like it's just so convoluted that it's just difficult to work with, because we don't have enough tooling right now to deal with the massive log output of this thing. We can actually go to the CLI. So this is an admin thing. You know, this is like raw log data, right? It's just massive. In any case, back to here. So in any case, things can come in if they hit any of the APIs or any of the other wired microservices that feed into this thing. They'll get processed, show up here, and under certain conditions it will auto-respond to things, but the system's actions are constrained by when you log in. So when you as a mediator log in, you've just turned the crank to allow the system to process. Even if you don't see it here, it could be sitting in a queue, and you won't see it on the dashboard either. So it might be waiting to go from the global workspace. So there's a global workspace queue, which will push into here or into here after it's done something, assuming it didn't take action. Whereas the actual things that it's tried to do and it's thought about, any of that stuff that wasn't an internal thought that fed back into the queue. So this stuff will show up in this list. Well, only the things since the last memory dump. And so right now we still don't have it pulling up associated models, because it just right now is too processor heavy to do that, and we need to do some more work on parallelizing it. This is not an error. Actually, this just means that there's PyCon data that needs to be, that's still in development for generating these icons, which represent emotional states. So this is like a little Plucheck indicator of where there are valences in the model. So that's essentially how mediation works. When you're done, you can click exit and you're logged out. And that's essentially it. Thank you, and please mediate, because it is the only way we have to make the system work. And the more mediators, the smarter the system is, essentially. And that's it. Thank you.